Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Israel Brief. I'm Rolene Marks. This is the Israel Brief, where we take a look at those top stories making headlines every Monday to Thursday. As always, the Israel Brief is brought to you in partnership with Lay of the Land. It is day 503. There are 69 hostages that remain captive in the Gaza Strip. Now, before I get into the latest news, I am going to get to your audience questions and the Mench and the moron of the week, because a promise made is a promise kept. But these last now 24 hours came the news and were the hours we prayed would never happen. Last night we got the excruciating news that the bodies that we would receive today would be that of Shiri Bibas and her two beautiful boys, Ariel and Kfir, as well as 84-year-old great-grandfather Oded Lifshitz. All four of them were taken from Kibbutz Nir Oz on the 7th of October. And before I get into the proceedings of the day, I want to talk a little bit about these people. On day 360, I went down to Kibbutz Nir Oz as part of a foreign press contingent. It was at the invitation of the government press office here. Kibbutz Nir Oz, very close to the border with Gaza, an agricultural kibbutz filled with the most extraordinary people, was one of those worst hit on the 7th of October. 1 in 4 of 400 residents were either murdered or taken hostage. The majority of the homes, and they are very modest homes on Kibbutz Nir Oz, and this was a decision taken by the kibbutz to keep it modest and to put all the money back into helping the kibbutz grow. Nearly all of the homes are completely destroyed by Hamas terrorists and the civilians from Gaza who poured in on the 7th of October and raped and murdered and mutilated and set fire. When I went to Kibbutz Nir Oz, I stood outside the Bibas home where the toys of late Ariel and Kfir are still in the little garden, where now a nation wraps its arms around Yarden Bibas, who was released just 2 weeks ago. We wrap our arms around Yarden and the family. How the hell are they going to get through this? Shiri, whose parents were slaughtered on that day, along with her two little boys, and her parents mark 3 generations of one family wiped out by Hamas. 3 generations, Shiri's parents, Shiri and her 2 beautiful little boys. As you can see, we are all wearing orange today because we are all Bibas. I went to the kindergarten, Gantut, the strawberry kindergarten, where little Ariel's hook for his school bag was there. Inside this little kindergarten where you couldn't breathe, because Hamas had thrown hand grenades and the inside was so badly burnt and still stank of smoke 360 days later. Shiri's cousin, Yifat Zayla, addressed the foreign press pleading for the world not to forget about her cousin, Shiri, Ariel, and baby Kfir. Shiri, Ariel, and baby Kfir have become the face of the hostages, the face of the horrors of that day. If there is anyone on here that is still supporting, still rationalizing, justifying the murder, the rape, and the kidnapping of innocent civilians, now would be the time to leave. Kibbutz Nir Oz, a beautiful little kibbutz filled with wonderful people. Every couple of meters lies a memorial to somebody who was slain trying to defend the kibbutz. And I stood outside the house of Oded Lifshitz. Oded's wife, Yocheved, was released shortly after she was taken captive by Hamas in 2023. Oded was 84 years old, a great-grandfather. When we went down to kibbutz near Oz and stood outside his decimated home, where he and his wonderful wife had made jam and cooked and entertained, and where he sat every weekend with his wonderful daughter-in-law Rita and drank a beer and gazed out upon the fields. When we stood outside the home of Oded Lifshitz, one of the foreign press turned to one of the others with a big grin on his face and said, "A little bit of distraction here." And now Oded is dead, murdered by Hamas, an 84-year-old great-grandfather, much loved by his family and his community. But that's not just one part of his story. Oded was a peacemaker, and every week Oded would drive children from Gaza who needed treatment for cancer to hospitals in Israel as part of a program called Road to Recovery. Oded believed in the promise of peace. I remember standing amongst the ruins of his home and his daughter-in-law Rita saying, "My only hope is that he's being held captive by a family in Gaza who recognize him for the humanitarian work that he has done, for the peace work that he has done." And today Oded and Shiri and Kfir and Ariel were brought back in coffins. The feeling of grief and rage in this country is palpable. Our collective hearts are shattered. President Herzog, taking to Twitter today, said, "Forgive me, forgive me, forgive us for not being able to protect you. Forgive us for not being there on that day." At about 9 o'clock this morning, after Hamas had finished building their demonic stages with the horrific messages taunting the people of Israel, displaying their evil for the whole world to see, parading the coffins with photographs of each of our murdered hostage on the front. And I must tell you, when I saw Shiri's coffin up close, because despite the cameras not being able to get as close, one from the Associated Press was able to, a sound of grief came out of my body that I didn't know how to identify. Hamas paraded those coffins for the world to see, while ecstatic music played and civilians of Gaza, including babies and children, watched on. Babies and children watched on. As we take our children to football games, to concerts, they brought their children to the macabre viewing of their terror porn. The Red Cross arrived, as they customarily do, because they are nothing really but a glorified Uber agency, and signed for the coffins of our murdered people. They attempted to put up a screen, but there were cameras there. And we saw the Red Cross loading the coffins containing the remains of our beloved people into the back of their cars and then taking them back to the meeting point where the IDF would receive them. Now, when the IDF did receive them, sappers, bomb experts, had to check those coffins for booby traps and bombs. Now, there were a lot of rumors that they locked the coffins and gave the IDF the incorrect keys, but the IDF have denied this and said the coffins can be opened. In a respectful ceremony, the coffins were draped in Israeli flags. saluted. The chief rabbi of the IDF intoned the mourner's prayer, the Kaddish, on our beloved Shiri, Ariel, Kfir and Oded. And in a moving ceremony, placed them onto vehicles, police vehicles, where they were escorted to Abu Kabir Forensic Institute, where their remains will be tested to make sure that they are in fact the people that they say, and to try and determine how they were murdered. Now, of course, Hamas try to absolve themselves of all responsibility and are blaming Israel, but they are to blame. They are to blame. Them and the civilians who came in from the Gaza Strip on that dark Saturday, they are to blame. The image of a terrified Shiri cradling her two beautiful boys while she is surrounded by terrorists with guns, some with masks, some without, and taken from their home, not to return alive. Or dead, we don't even want to contemplate the circumstances around his kidnapping. The parade by Hamas was so repugnant that even the UN human rights chief, Volker Turk, certainly no friend of Israel, has condemned it, calling it a abhorrent parade of the bodies of hostages and a violation of international law. Some of the international media, like The Talk and others, refused to broadcast this terror porn. The BBC and Sky News and Al Jazeera, of course, did with glee. The British Embassy here in Israel has condemned Hamas's parading of bodies, as has the German Foreign Minister. But we are now at a deciding point. If there is anyone who questions who the true victims of genocide are, all you had to do is cast your eye upon Khan Yunis in the Gaza Strip this morning. The intentions were there for everybody to see. Hamas don't hide their evil. They broadcast it with glee. The time has come for the people on this planet to decide, are you on the side of light or are you on the side of evil and darkness? Now, forensic pathologists have said that the testing of the remains can take a while. And of course, now all that remains for us to do is to grieve, is to respect the privacy of the families who want to mourn, to hold them in our prayers, and to hold them with as much love as possible. May the memories of Oded, Shiri, Kfir, and Ariel be eternally blessed. I have two questions for today. One coming from Stephen, who wants to know, did the ICJ and ICC have footage of what happened on the 7th of October? Well, I can't speak for the ICC yet because no submissions have been made by Israel yet, but the ICJ most certainly did. In fact, Stephen, to answer your question, they were given 20 minutes of the footage. I had the trauma of watching that footage along with other members of the press a couple of months ago. And if you are not disgusted by what you see, then you just have no soul. The evidence was all there. Raped women, mutilated people, beheaded babies. It was all there for the ICJ to see. Cheryl wants to know, does Hamas get paid? Cheryl, in the billions. In the billions. All the money that you pay in tax in your countries to go to regenerating the Gaza Strip goes into the pockets of Hamas. All the billions that you have given in tax money for humanitarian aid in the Gaza Strip goes into the coffers of Hamas and their compatriots, Palestinian Islamic Jihad and other terror groups. Iran, Qatar, major sponsors of Hamas, as is the Muslim Brotherhood and as is any other entity that supports them. South Africans, if I were you, I'd be telling Cyril Ramaphosa, no more of my tax money goes towards Gaza, because all it does is it lands up in the coffers of Hamas. All the millions in aid given to UNRWA, the United Nations Relief Works Agency, goes to the coffers of Hamas, spreading their ideology in schools, spreading their hate across their media. And the results of that we have seen today. Before we break for the weekend, I will tell you who our Mench and our moron of the week is. I'll start with our Mench. Our Mench, this has come in from a few of you, Erin Molan, the Australian journalist, for her incredible standing with Israel and for speaking truth to power. Erin, if you ever watch this, thank you. The other Menches are all the media who today refused to broadcast the repugnant images coming from the Gaza Strip. Our morons of the week: Francesca Albanese, the special rapporteur for what the UN call the occupied territories. All she does is parrot Hamas ideology and some of the most vile anti-Semitism. In fact, she was interviewed by a news channel a few days ago, and the opening question was, "Are you an anti-Semite?" Countries have appealed to the UN to fire her. She is that appalling. She has justified the actions of Hamas. And if the UN has any jot of consideration for human rights, they would fire her. And the other morons of the week are the BBC for broadcasting 1 hour of Hamas verbiage, Sky News and any other media channel, and any other person who has taken to the streets or gone onto campus or gone onto social media and justified the murder, the kidnapping, the raping that took place on October the 7th. So guys, I know this has been a longer transmission. It has been a heavy one to watch. Before I wish you well for the weekend, I want to remind you to check out our website at www.layoftheland.online, our Facebook page at Lottle Site, our YouTube channel at The Israel Brief. We're on X at Lay of the Land 5, on Instagram at Rolene_Marks, and on LinkedIn at Rolene Marks. Guys, God bless you. Take care of yourselves. Shabbat Shalom. And I will see you again on Monday. Bye for now.